Very good afternoon to everybody. Hope you all are safe and well at home. Thank you for logging into our Zoom session today on the workshop that we've been having over the last few weeks, UB Research Essentials series. So today we're going to continue where we left off. So before I start, some housekeeping. Kindly be informed, this session is being recorded. So I have also muted all your microphone. At the end of the presentation, if you have some questions, you can raise your hands and you can ask the question directly and I will unmute you. Or as we discuss, you can continuously post your question in the chat and we will come back to the questions at the end of the session. We will try to make this presentation as brief as possible. A lot of detail is already in the slides. So when you get access to the slides, you can also view the details and also view the recording of the session. As long as you're registered, you will get the information. Okay. So this session, just to baseline everyone, I will always repeat these first few slides to ensure all newcomers are aware what we are doing in this session. So this session is to assist all researchers at UB and also outside UB with the aim to strengthen their knowledge and skills in executing good projects, good research projects, and of course, good and well-structured publications, which will be our main focus. Additionally, this session will also provide sufficient or essential knowledge for graduate students and researchers. So you will see as part of the program, we have included also sessions on research supervision, managing referencing, and all the publication process and developing your own research profile. So this session will be perfect for potential students who would be keen to continue their studies at a graduate level, or even anyone who is keen to enhance their knowledge on research. Over the last week, we've conducted the first two sessions already, Introduction to UB Research Essentials on the topic and writing. And then we've also conducted on how to prepare a good abstract and executive summary and introduction chapter. So for those of you who have missed this part of the series, you can still get access to it because every single presentation has been recorded. All the slides are made available. As long as you are registered, we will send it to you. If you have not received it, please email research@ub.edu.bs and we will get back to you. So today's session is very much focused on writing literature review. So I will be doing the first part of the session today before Miss Virginia Ballance take over the second half of the session today. So let's look at what literature review is all about and try to understand how do we structure a good literature review. Carrying out a good literature review is important. As discussed in our previous sessions, before you decide to broaden or narrow down your research topic, you should have done good literature review of all the available sources. That will make your research topic more relevant because you have done the literature search. Literature review is an overview of sources you have explored on a specific topic. It provides an overview of current knowledge, allowing you to identify relevant theories, methods, and gaps in the existing research, and to demonstrate to your readers how your research fits into the larger field of study. This can include from scholarly articles, books, and all other relevant sources. So the main aim of literature review is to answer the why question not just what someone have said. Okay, sometimes we have the tendency to just report what someone said, but why they said it and what is the implication of what they say is also as important. A good literature review will have summary of key sources, landmark articles on the topic, and it will be well organized. A good literature review will combine both summary, what was reported, and synthesis. When I say synthesis here is why and so what of whatever that has been reported. So, and how it fits into your study. If you carry out a good literature review, you are able to give a new interpretation. You are able to understand the progression of the knowledge. You are able to evaluate the relevance of the sources, and hence you can decide the gaps. Is there a gap in the current knowledge, and are you contributing to fill that gap? As identified in this diagram that you see, there are various purposes of carrying out a good literature review. Finding out what information is already there. This is your gap that I mentioned to you earlier. Find other people's working in your field, identifying major seminal works on that field, identifying main methodologies and research techniques. Can also be for the purpose of identifying main ideas, conclusion, theories, and establish if there is any similarities or difference. So that will contribute back to the gaps. Provides a context of your own research, and also show the relationship between all the previous studies or the theories. It is important to think of knowledge in a given field as consisting of 3 layers. If you look at this diagram here. First, there are the primary studies that researchers conduct and publish. This is where all journal reviews are carried out. Second are the reviews of those studies that summarize and offer new interpretation built from and often extending beyond the original studies. These are the systematic reviews that are carried out based on research questions. As you progress further, you have what we call the meta-analysis. There are perceptions, conclusions, opinion, and interpretation that are shared informally that becomes part of the field that you are looking at, that you are studying on. So the meta-analysis, these are the meta-analysis that to understand the statistically significant result that is in relation to the study that you are doing. So there are different levels of studies that you can actually do. In composing a literature review, it is important to note that it is often this meta-analysis that is cited as a true literature review. Why? Because it is able to critically review the literature. So it is not just the what, but why someone has said something and how can that be in relation to the study that you are doing. So if you look at the different types of literature review available, I'm sure you have come across all these kind of different types of literature review that's already available. The argumentative review, this informs basically to this form examines the literature selectively in order to support or refute an argument, deeply embedded assumptions or philosophical problem already established in the literature. The purpose is normally to develop a body of literature that establish any viewpoints that is related, given the value-laden nature of some social science research. Example, educational reform research, the immigration control research. You may always need to carry out literature review based on this approach. Then there's also the integrative type of review. This is considered a form of research that reviews critiques, and synthesizes representative literature on a topic in an integrated way such that new frameworks and perspective on the topics are then generated. Historical review is another approach of carrying out literature review. Historical reviews are focused on examining research throughout a period of time, often starting with the first time an issue, concept, theory, phenomena emerged in the literature. So the purpose is to place research in a historical context and also to show familiarity with the state-of-the-art development that has taken place in that particular research area. The methodological review focuses on not just on what someone has said, but on how this approach was actually carried out. So this approach provides a framework of understanding all the research approach in carrying out the study, whether it's a quantitative approach, whether it's a qualitative approach, and what is the evolution of the method in that particular research field. Then you have the systematic reviews that gives you, that consists of an overview of existing evidence pertaining to a clearly formulated research question. So this is based on the using your system, your research questions to actually make the review. Then of course you have the more common, the theoretical review, where you actually examine the corpus of the theory that has accumulated in regards to an issue concept. So this is, so there are many ways to actually look at this. And then there are different sources of literature review. There are the primary sources that all of you have used. And then there's also the secondary sources that we use a lot in research work. And then of course, there are the tertiary ones, all the encyclopedias and indexes that we use. So the way how you use this literature varies from one publication to another and for the different purpose that is being used. And then if you look at the structure of any literature review, it always follows this funnel approach. The structure of the review that you carry out has to be done from general to specific. So it has to be very much using this approach. So related work that you have done will basically give you the background of the study. And then as you move closer to what you are trying to do in this study, to follow through your research question, it will allow you to funnel the way how you write your literature review. So don't start with the micro, but write the macro. Go general, and then you narrow it down little by little as you come exactly to the topic that you are writing. So there are 4 stages of developing any literature review. Typically, you have the problem formulation, basically what you're trying to examine. Okay, you need to be very sure what you're trying to do because there's a lot of resources out there. And then you have the literature search. The search, how are you going to search this information? What approach are you using? Are you using an online approach? Are you using some combination of Boolean search? So how are you going to find this information? And then the third aspect is evaluation. What is good or what is bad? Not every literature can be used for literature review. So there are some universities who have banned certain online materials for research. So you've got to be clear what is real research sources that can be used and what are just opinions that that cannot be used to substantiate the study that you're actually doing. So analysis and interpretation becomes the next part of it. So once you have all this data to evaluate, you got to synthesize it and see whether the findings can be relevant to the research area that you are focusing on. So you need to ensure that when you carry out all these 4 stages, you go through rounds and rounds of clarification of this literature. How many sources you want to include. What is, because if you see, when you do a literature review, it's a never-ending process. So you need to know when to stop. So what is the approach that you have taken? If your aim is, I'm going to analyze the last 5 years research on this area, then specify that. You need to be clear what is a methodology for you to even do the literature review. Finding models. What type of sources should I review? My aim is only to look at journal articles. My aim is only to look at book publication, or my aim is to look at a mix of fields. So what is the model of your approach when you carry out literature review? And then narrowing the scope. How do you scope your, how do you try to narrow down what you have already found, or what you have already searched? Because remember where I told you in our previous session before that, when you carry out a literature review, quite often you tend to get a lot of information if your topic of research is too broad. So the moment you find a lot of information appearing, then you know very well that, okay, you got to start narrowing it down. If you don't narrow it down, then you may have a problem of having too much of information and you'll be sidetracked by going into different areas, and it may not even achieve the research question that you are looking at. Consider whether sources are current. This is important in some discipline especially. If you look at fields like the science and technology, even 1 to 2 years can become obsolete. So you have to be careful what kind of literature that you are using and what field are you looking at. Writing a review in the social sciences, survey of the history of the literature may be what is needed, because it is important to know the perspective. But in sciences, it may be slightly different. So if you look at this diagram, it basically shows you how do you effectively do a desktop research, which is what all of us do, right? When we first start doing our research, we just lock ourselves and start doing this research using our desktop, not even going out to do our field work. So if you look at this, I'm not going to run through this diagram, but it's quite straightforward on the process, on how do you set the research question, and then you take it through one by one all the way until you have identified the themes and conclusion that is needed for your study. So organizing a literature review is important. You can organize it in different ways. So I always have a table that I prepare whenever I'm doing any literature review. So don't just have a document, you print the document and then keep highlighting it. As you keep highlighting, you realize that you have a big files of literature review with all this highlighted document. And then when you want to make an analysis, you struggle because you would run through the whole file again and you would have forgotten what was highlighted and what is in the article. So it's always a good habit to prepare a table like this and pick up the information that you want and put it into this table and arrange it accordingly. So if we see, these are some of the examples of how you can arrange. So there's no right or wrong way of arranging. It's all up to you. So you can arrange it based on certain headings, and then you go down to the indicators or the constructs that you are trying to look for, and then what are the quotation that comes out of all these articles. So this approach is good because when you start writing your literature review, you would actually write based on these constructs rather than based on publication. If you notice, sometimes when you read certain journal articles, you would realize certain citations keep appearing again and again within the same page. And then as you move to the next page, different set of citations keep appearing. That clearly shows that the researcher has not done a thorough literature review. He has done it article by article. It should not be article by article. It should be done based on the construct. So if you have compiled it in this form, then you can actually write a new heading. Let's say in this case, I have a subtopic called excellence in research. And then what the researchers have said on the definition of excellence in research. So you can pick up some of these quotes and then you can agree or you can disagree and can discuss it more accurately compared to taking article by article. So writing your literature review, once you have settled on how to organize your literature review, you are ready to write each section. When you're writing a review, keep in mind all these issues here. A literature review in using the first one, the use evidence. A literature review in this sense is just like any other academic research paper. Your interpretation of the available sources must be backed up with evidence to show that what you are saying is valid. So this is critical in any literature review. Be selective. Select only the most important points in each sources to highlight in the review. The type of information you choose to mention should relate directly to the research problem, whether it is thematic, methodological, or even chronological. The third point, use quotes sparingly. Some short quotes are okay if you want to emphasize a point, or if what the authors said just cannot be rewritten in your own words. Sometimes you may need to quote certain terms that were coined by the author, not common knowledge, or taken directly from the study. Do not use extensive quotes as a substitute of your own summary and interpretation of the literature. So you got to use it sparingly. Summarize and synthesize. Remember, this is critical, to summarize and synthesize your sources within each paragraph as well as throughout the review. Recapitulate important features of a research study, but then synthesize it by rephrasing the study's significance and relating to their own work. Because quite often when you run an application to check on plagiarism, application like Turnitin, the biggest chunk that when the report is generated, you will see is coming from the literature review, because you tend to cut and paste what someone has said without really paraphrasing or synthesizing what basically this author or researcher have actually said. Keep your own voice when you write. While the literature reviews presents others' ideas, your voice as the researcher should remain in front and center. That is critical. For example, weave references to other sources into what you are writing. So that will strengthen the point that you're trying to make on the information that is being quoted. And the last point here is use caution when paraphrasing. So this is another problem that you also see quite often happening. You tend to paraphrase someone's work, and you may have misquoted what he or she was trying to imply in the paper. So sometimes paraphrasing can become a problem if you rewrite it in your own words without accurately understanding what the author was trying to actually say. So that basically gives you a good overview of how do you structure literature review. The details, there are more details in the slides that when you get access to that you can look at. So at the same time, there's a lot of common mistakes that we tend to make when we do literature review. Sources do not clearly relate to the research problem. Okay, our aim is to increase the length of our reference list. So you just plug some just for the sake of making your reference longer, you tend to put sources that sometimes has no basis or have no relation to the problem that you're trying to research. So be very careful when you do that. You do not take sufficient time to define. You're in a hurry to complete the paper. As a result, you have a problem. You rely exclusively on secondary sources, okay? And you do not use that many primary research studies. So this is also another problem. So you must have a right balance. You uncritically accept any finding that you see in the paper. So this is, again, it depends on what kind of papers are you quoting. Normally, if the articles from all those journals that are well-established, high-impact journals, then it is more you can rely on the findings, but there are a lot of journals out there that do not reach to the level, and you have a problem sometimes quoting something that may not be as valid. So you got to be very careful. So in your own field, I can't tell you which is right, which is wrong, but in your own field, you should know which are the journals that you should actually be looking at. Does not describe the search procedure. So when you do a literature, this is a good habit. How did you shortlist your literature? This is important because there's too much of literature out there. So how do you ensure that you have covered everything? So you can be based on certain timeline or based on certain Boolean search that you use when you look for this information. So you can actually define that how the literature review was actually carried out. Reports isolated statistical result rather than synthesizing. So don't just cut and paste someone's figures, data and figures without actually understanding. Okay, so sometimes when you do not really synthesize the studies well, it may not jive to the study that you are actually carrying out. So be very careful when you just take someone's data. Only include research that validates assumption and does not consider contrary findings or alternative interpretation. So everything positive you take, everything negative you don't, or you do not, you just accept the fact that has been published by this researcher. So you can challenge all these assumptions. So you do not need to take it directly. So this is important as well when you actually carry out literature review. So do not just review for the content. Okay, do not just review what scholars are saying, but how are they saying it. So as I've said at the beginning, not just what they have said, okay, but how are they saying it and why are they saying it and how is this critical for you. When do I know I can stop looking and move on? So this is always a problem, especially if you are doing graduate studies at the master's level or at the doctoral level. When do you stop? Okay, literature review is ongoing because information always changes. So you will always be changing documents, changing your chapters on literature review as new information come forward. But again, there must be a timeline that you have to put to say, I have to stop here. This information will evolve further. So if you look at some of these next few slides here, I'm just going to go quickly. These are some examples of papers that have done a very good job in compiling literature review. And most literature review that you compile can be a paper by itself. You can actually produce a conceptual framework just by reviewing all the literature. So this is one example that you can look. So this is on destination image. So the researcher have actually compiled all the literature that had all the sources that he have used, and then have put a structure in how this data was analyzed. So if you look at this paper is just a review of the literature review. And a review paper like this normally gets very high citation because by just reading this one article, I get access to a lot of information. So if you see here, there are all these attributes that came out of the studies can also be analyzed. Okay, and then what are the method that is being used? Okay, you can analyze the methodology that is used, the authors that have come up with the techniques for the qualitative technique or any quantitative technique. What are the approach used and what is the gap now in the current knowledge? By doing this, we're able to see all that. Further, you can actually come up with all kind of model based on the literature, on the method that has been used, or even the construct that has come out from the study. So this paper basically tells you that just by doing a literature review, you can produce a good paper by just doing a desktop research. So that's the first part of doing a research. Start with a good desktop research and then move to your actual field work. So there are a lot of applications that can help you to do this. So you don't need to just rely on Microsoft Word. There are softwares like NVivo. Most of you may know NVivo is a application that is used to do qualitative research, okay, to actually record and analyze qualitative interviews. But at the same time, the same application can also be used to analyze literature review. Because remember, when you do a literature review, it's same as doing an interview and transcribing it and finding the themes. And then you're making an analysis based on the themes. It's the same for literature review. So once you use NVivo to your literature review, it is able to classify the information accordingly and examine the relationship between this classified information and form a pattern and theme. And that's exactly what NVivo is meant for. So if you see, just before I conclude my part, so using NVivo will actually help you to structure your literature review more efficiently. Why more efficiently? Because you are able to go back to the same literature if you're writing another paper. So you are not doing a literature review just for one paper, and along the way you may have found some information that may be useful for your next paper. But if you have used an application like NVivo, you can easily go back to the article and pull out different patterns that has came out and can assist you to rewrite another paper that you're working on. So there is an advantage of using NVivo. Of course, there are the traditional way of just saving it in Microsoft Word or Excel and review. You can still do that way, but it takes more time. There are a lot of helps now using different technology to actually assist you to write better paper. So now I would like to hand over to Ms. Ballance to talk to you about the next section.
Thank you, Vic. You need to share your screen now because you were dropped and you logged back in.
Oh, you mean you didn't see the screen?
I don't have control of your screen.
No,
I have viewing your screen.
No, can you see my screen?
I can see your screen, yes.
Okay, okay, let me. Okay, can you?
Yeah, okay, I can now. Thank you.
All right.
So thank you very much. Oops, now we're watching this video.
Okay. You'll need to. Okay, this is something that you can watch at the end later. Let's just go with the presentation first. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that little blip. Early on in the first session, Dr. Vic mentioned that if you find a really good article, you should look at its reference list to find other sources that might be useful in your research. So that's basically what citation tracking or citation chasing is all about. When an important article is published, like the one in the middle of my screen by Feltzer, the original article, to the left are the articles which he used or he or she used to write their article. But equally, citation tracking goes forward. So then you can see who used Feltzer's article. So it's like a bicycle, two wheels, one from the back feeding into the article which was published, and then the wheel going on the right forward, who quoted from the original article that you've located. So you can use this as a neat way of finding more articles on your topic. Now am I going forward? Okay, so citation tracking can also be used as a method to find a landmark or influential article because you can see how often it's been cited. You can also use citation tracking as a means to determine whether it's a very impactful article, one which has been cited by a lot of people and subsequently cited by others. And it will help you also determine if it's a study that was used in numerous fields. It's an interdisciplinary article based on where the article was quoted, in which other journals, in which other fields. So once you find a landmark article, you can see what they used to write the paper and then who's quoted from them. And when a paper has been highly cited, it will have a high impact factor. And that information is used for promotions and research funding and tenure, and even library collection development decisions. So most databases these days include information about the number of times an article has been cited or used by other scholars, and that gives you some idea about the impact of that article. But there are some little problems that you should be aware of with citation tracking. Authors' names may vary depending on the indexing policies of the databases. For instance, certain databases only include the surname and the one initial. So if your name is John Smith, Smith, J, might be quite a name which appears many, many times in the database. So that's not helpful. Names may not be complete on various articles. People may change their name. When women get married, they change their name. They get divorced, you change your name. So it's not helpful to track someone's work. And also, some databases only include the first named author. So if you're the third named author on an article, you're not indexed in that database. So a way around that is to use author profiles in Google Scholar or ORCID in order to pull together all articles by a particular author. Also, citation tracking is really limited to one database. Like EBSCO, for instance, the databases, it's only per database. So you can click on an author's name and it's only going to pull up the articles by that author in that one database. Now, free databases like Google Scholar are not curated by a human. The entries are often pulled off of the internet and they're not reviewed by someone with a brain. And so they make big mistakes. And I'm sure you've all seen some real doozers, like an article I found by Health, M. And when you looked at the article itself, the author was the Ministry of Health. So you have to be careful about looking for names in databases. Examples of databases with good citation tracking are Google Scholar, EBSCO databases, and use the PlumX metrics which we find in databases more and more. JSTOR used to have a citation locator, but that was dropped, and they said they might reinstate it in the next release, but I haven't yet seen it. Google Scholar, here's how it works. I've searched for something by DeLuca on buzz pollination, and the thing I've circled there on the screen, cited by 109. So his article has been cited by 109 people. Also bear in mind, Google Scholar will collect up anything which has been indexed. So it will also include PowerPoints, Word documents, as well as journal articles. However, if the author that you're searching for has a Google Scholar profile, you can click on the name. As you see P.A. DeLuca, you can click on that name and see all articles that fall under that author's profile. So that's an example of citation tracking by scholar name. And when we do click on his name, we can see all the articles he has included in his profile. Either they are picked up off of Google Scholar or the author has added them himself. In our EBSCO databases, down here, I'm trying to demonstrate two things. There's a cited references in this article number 2, dogs, a continuing and common neighborhood nuisance of New Providence. You can see that the number of articles cited is 20, and in EBSCO you can click on that and it takes you to a list of those articles, which will then takes you to hyperlinks if those articles appear in this database that you can just download. Then next to that it says time cited in the database. Unfortunately, I covered it up. It was cited once in this database, and then you can click on that and it takes you to who has quoted that article. The time cited in the database links appear for each article in the search results in most EBSCO databases, such as Business Source, Academic Search, SNL, which is the cumulative index to nursing and allied health, PsycInfo, and SocialLit. Also, EBSCO includes Plum X metrics to give you information, what they call social media information. So how many times people have looked at the abstract or the full text, how many have captured the information to export into another bibliography management system, and how many citation indexes it appears. It also would mention things like if it appears in a blog, or how many times the article was tweeted, that kind of thing as well. As well on EBSCO, on the top ribbon, the blue line, you see it says cited references. You can search by the cited references in an article, either by the author's name, the source, any field, the title of the article, whatever. So you can find works by a particular author or a publication and click on Find Citing Articles. For example, on this screen I've shown, I searched for the International Journal of Bahamian Studies. And it shows how many articles use that source in their reference lists. But again, the limitations to this is that it's only 2 articles appearing in that database. And one thing Dr. Vic mentioned was that when do you know when you have to stop searching for articles for your literature review? Compiling a literature review really isn't a one-shot deal. You can't just sit down Wednesday afternoon, make a list of articles, and start analyzing them, particularly if you're working on a thesis, a doctoral thesis, in a field that's rapidly changing. You can't really stop until the day before you turn in your paper, because there's always something going to be new published in your field, and you don't want to be embarrassed to find out that you missed a very important current article. So how do you do that? You use what we call content alerting or current awareness services. And this used to be done manually. Librarians would photocopy the title pages of print journals when they came in and then circulate that to the professors. But nowadays, it's way better. It's way easier to do this because everything is automated. So you can select a database, save a search, and then ask it to run the search on a periodic time, like a week or month, whatever, or whenever, and send you the articles. So you have also table of contents alerts. When a new journal issue has been published, they send you the table of contents. Alternately, you can use social media things like RSS feeds, Twitter or Facebook, to receive new notifications of new content on web pages or news sources. A journal alert, for instance, a table of contents can be done via an aggregator or journal by journal. And they're good because that's when you know exactly which journal you like to read, then you only get the table of contents from that specific journal. It's very specialized. And note, you do not have to have a subscription to the journal in order to receive the table of contents alert. A database alert gives you wider coverage. It would be from a specific database in, let's say, EBSCO. Again, you would save whatever kind of search you want, whether it's a subject search, an author search, and when new content comes, they would email you the list. Now, the new articles. It's useful because it covers lots and lots of journals, thousands of journals. It will be a bit delayed relative to a journal search because these databases take a bit of time to aggregate and integrate new content. So let's say EBSCO does it every couple of weeks or once a month, depending on the database. So you won't always have the latest, like the day it's published, but it will be comprehensive across the database. But the downside is you need to be working in an institution which has a subscription to the database in order to get that. Social bookmarking. Oh dear, what did I do? Slideshow. Social bookmarking services alert you to pre-published research, and that would be things coming from out of, let's say, Google, Scholar, whatever. So there are loads of options to keep you up to date, whether you're searching by subject, by name of author, or in your particular discipline, or for a particular journal. But you need to keep up to date in order to make sure you have the latest in the field of study. These are examples. For instance, I get an email from PubMed, which is Medline, whenever the word Bahamas is indexed. And that keeps me up to date. And that comes about once every couple weeks. Google Scholar alerts whenever anything is published with the University of the Bahamas mentioned, or the College of Bahamas, I get an update, and so I know what's new. Setting up an alert in EBSCO is quite simple. It's straightforward. You just you log in. You give it a what's happening. You log in and you just give your email and tell how frequently you want results, and then you save the alert, and it's sent to you by an RSS feed. Let's see. Same thing with a journal. You can, as I said, you don't have to have a subscription. You can, these are Sage journals. You can just choose the journals you want to have updates from, and then add the alerts, and it emails you. Whoops. So a few words about evaluating sources. You need to be aware that these days anybody can publish anything online. So you, as a researcher, need to have the ability to sort out what's the good from the bad, the wheat from the chaff, distinguish between fact, fiction, and opinion, and evaluate the sources effectively. For example, evaluating the authority of the author. Who is the author? Where do they work? What are their credentials? What's their background? Have you seen their work cited elsewhere? What about the edition of the book or the chapter that you're looking at? Is the source current? What about the publisher? What about the journal? Is it a well-established journal from a university press? Is it scholarly? Because what kind of articles does that journal include? Because there's so many things published these days online which are not scholarly. Evaluating the content on the web, you want to look for who it's written for. Is it written objectively? What's the coverage, the style of writing, and are the reviews? Evaluating web sources is perhaps even more important these days. You need much closer evaluation. Is the content unique, or is it just borrowed from another site? Is the site current? Is there a date on that site? Do the links work? Does the site include contact information? Is the URL relevant to the focus of the material on the site? For instance, is it a .com site, a .edu site? So you must pay attention to all these things. There's a simple rubric called CRAAP, which helps you evaluate a website. Is the content current? Is the site relevant to the topic or the audience? Is the content accurate? Does it come from an authoritative source? And what is the purpose of the site? Is it meant to inform, to teach, to sell, to entertain? So you don't be fooled. You have to read critically in order to detect things like author's bias, a flawed research design. Is there a lack of citations for the journal article? Is a source misquoted? Is the sample the right size? That kind of thing. Sources for the literature review. Dr. Vic showed briefly a screen which showed there are 3 kinds of sources: primary sources, secondary sources, and tertiary sources. Primary sources would be, simply stated, original documents that were created at the time of the event. And there's no interpretation included in the document. They just represent exactly what happened. Examples being archives, diaries, audio recording, newspaper articles written at the time, that kind of thing, photographs, video recordings, and so on. Secondary sources are interpretations and evaluations of a primary source, which provide commentary on and discussion of evidence. And so when you do research, you must cite research. Primary sources do not represent research, but they are research resources. So the majority of sources in a literature review would tend to be secondary sources. Tertiary sources and other kinds of sources are those which distill large amount of information, such as encyclopedias, dictionaries, textbooks, that kind of thing. Other sources are what we call gray literature, which would be government reports, working papers, and then the third kind of literature are trade literature, which would be journal articles written in professional journals for, let's say, engineers or businessmen. Okay, and we also have to be aware that there are scholarly and popular publications. And for an academic article, you would probably be inclined to use a scholarly journal because the articles are peer-reviewed. A scholarly journal tends to focus only on academic topics. Articles have reference lists, whereas a popular publication is usually can be in-depth and have information, but typically lots of pictures, no references, and they're usually for sale in stores, whereas academic journals tend not to be. So to sum up, use citation tracking to find references used in an article, and then use who cited that article to find more articles. So the back, the history of the article, and the future of the article. Use alerting services that are on journal websites, scholarly databases, or social networking sites to keep you current in your area of interest, and use your critical thinking skills to evaluate the sources you use. And then your literature review will probably stand up to scrutiny. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. We also provided you with the list of resources that you can get access through the UB library, and also there are also other resources with some of the links that can further help you. There are also a lot of videos that we have attached here. So when you get access to this presentation file, so please try to go through the references and resources, and I hope it will actually help you further. Okay, now I would like to open the session for discussion. Let me see this. Okay, I think there's one message that is sent here regarding NVivo. I think this has always been a question to get access to NVivo, even at the university. In fact, we had one question not too long ago as well on how do we get access to NVivo, whether NVivo should be at the university, should be at the library, or is it managed by the IT department. Maybe Virginia, you want to add on to that? Virginia?
Hey, hi, I just muted my we don't have NVivo. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, we don't have NVivo. It's very expensive, but there are free alternatives that we can try to investigate. Open access ones, open source. And that's one little thing I want to look at this summer, because NVivo, although it's like the Cadillac or the Rolls-Royce, it might be out of our league at the moment. But if we can prove that we have a need, then perhaps it will become something that we can get.
Yes, I know the question of using NVivo and purchasing NVivo, I mean, we've been having this question for a while now, and it is expensive. And unless, of course, you have your own personal account. But we're trying to explore, as what Virginia said, there are other applications that can do almost similar to NVivo, and we're trying to try to explore that. So I can see a comment from Dr. Nicolette Bethel, to investigate open source qualitative analysis software. Yeah. So I'm sure there are. So since and Dr. Bethel, you've done a lot of research, qualitative based research. I think you will know best what is in the market currently for qualitative research application, because most qualitative research application out there can also be used to manage literature, because it works both ways, to manage the qualitative actual research and also to manage your literature. So that's one approach that we can actually do. But at the same time, let's look at it, because NVivo is expensive. I've used it in the past before, and it is very expensive. And it's not a one-off. You have to pay subscription every year. So it can actually be expensive for us to access to NVivo. There's one comment here on Boolean. Okay, to define Boolean. Okay, when you use certain applications, especially searching for articles in databases, especially in the library system, and even in Google for that matter, you can actually use certain symbols to focus your research. Okay, you can use the and or terms to actually find an article. So if you use a combination of these terminologies for this, you call it what? It's a terminology that you use. I know they use that a lot in the library for you to actually shortlist your sources more accurately, because in the internet you can actually get quite huge hits if you do not focus your search. Ms. Ballance, you want to add on to that on Booleans?
Yes, indeed. Often searches that you make, it automatically ORs the terms that you put in. EBSCO does that, and so people come back with the results hits of 3 million, and they just are overwhelmed. But if you learn how to use Boolean logic, you say, I want this, or and this, and this, and this. It will make sure that you it narrows your search. So it's counterintuitive, because if you think you want this and this and this, you're adding things together. In fact, you're excluding them. Boolean logic is what we did in about grade 8, Venn diagrams.
Yes.
And or not. And then other little tricks are to use truncation of terminology so that you get all the terms that start the same and have different endings. Nurse, nursing, nursery, whatever.
Okay, is there any other question? You can also raise your hand and you can ask the question directly if you want to, and I can unmute you, or you can actually put it in the chat. The time now is 1:30 sharp, so we are at the end of the session today. So is there any final question, some burning question that you want us to respond? You can still write to us anytime at research@ub.edu.bs, and we can still come back to you if you have any issues in trying to structure your publication, or need help on guiding you on the work that you're doing now currently, the publications that you're doing. I'm sure a lot of you are using this lockdown period to work on something. You're not, most probably many of us may not be even traveling during summer, so maybe it's a good time for us to work on some publication. Do a desktop publication research, even if we can't go out. So please.
We have loads of resources.
Yeah.
So we have loads of resources.
Yes, indeed.
Through the university.
Okay, if there's no more question, once again, thank you for taking your time today to learn, or to even to refresh your memory. I'm sure a lot of things that we have said today is not something new to you. I'd like to once again thank Ms. Virginia Ballance for taking time today afternoon to be with us here to give us a short briefing on how do we manage literature review. Our next session will be on Tuesday, same time. We're going to be focusing on methodology for the Tuesday session. And then the Friday session next week will be on the results and discussion. So I know there's a lot of information coming out from this. So that is why it is recorded. The slides are available. So take your time to go through it. If you have further questions, don't hesitate to contact us. So until we see you next week on Tuesday, take care, stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.